Alright, back with another video. With Regulation D being out for about a week and a half, 2 weeks now, and people's first now getting into the ladder and trying to grind through the ladder, the meta, at least for Regulation D, is actually starting to kind of mellow out a little bit. We're seeing what's being played and the stuff that's in your mid to higher tiers of play and that type of thing. So I figured I might as well do a video kind of talking about some Pokemon that are actually really good right now that I think are like anti-meta picks that are not really even being played at all or really dropped off in usage since like Regulation C that are actually really good like anti-meta picks right now that I think it should be played a lot more. So got 5 mons. I'm going to be talking about them in this video. So not going to be too much on screen. I'm just going to kind of be going through movesets and kind of talking about where they really fit in, what they would really be good for, and some of the top stuff that they're actually really good against right now. So apart from that, if you guys like these types of videos, leave a like, subscribe, share the video. I really appreciate it. And if this video does well, I'll be sure to do a lot more of these in the future. So Regulation D, first off, we're going to be starting off with Frigoraph. Now, you guys probably didn't really probably forgot about Frigoraph even existing, if I'm being 100% real. At least me, I actually forgot about this thing. I've had this thing in the back of my mind for a long time, actually, just because it was really good in Regulation C, and you see this thing a lot, but I feel like ever since Cresselia's really got put into the game, you don't see this thing being played at all and used at all on anything. And I think that's the main problem is because Cresselia kind of does its job a little better. I think the real reason why Frigoraph, I think, is really like underrated like anti-meta pick right now is mainly because of its ability, Armor Tail. Now, if you guys know what Armor Tail actually does, it protects itself and its allies from priority moves, which is huge right now. If you guys know what's really going on is Prankster Mons. This also actually protects against Prankster because that's also priority moves. So like stuff like Tornadus, Prankster Tornadus, and Thundurus, really common right now, especially Thundurus with like Eerie Impulse and a bunch of other Leer and a bunch of other random stuff there sets going around. Also a bunch of other priority like Extreme Speed, Dragonite, Chien-Pao with Sucker Punch. At least as of when I'm recording this, Sucker Punch is the only like dark type move a lot of the Chien-Paos are actually running. They don't actually run 2 dark moves because they just don't have enough room for it on their movesets right now. And if you're not running like Sacred Sword or like another coverage type move or something else like Ice Spinner, then you're missing out on a ton of coverage for your team, especially if you're using it alongside like Chien-Pao, Dragonite, or some other type of stuff. So being able to pretty much wall out Chien-Pao, especially if a lot of them are just mainly running Sucker Punch, they can't touch you at all. Huge for this thing. And a lot of the other priority in the game right now, Aqua Jet from Urshifu, Basca Legion can't really do anything to you. It can hit you with water moves, but it can't touch you with like any type of ghost type moves, and it can't spam Aqua Jet versus you, which is a thing it likes to do. There's a lot of other stuff that's just priority based, which you guys are probably, if there's some stuff I also forget in this, let me know in the comments down below. I'm going to try to make this video as fast as possible and like simple and understand as possible. I don't want to sit here for like 20 minutes talking about everything, but if there's some stuff I do not mention, let me know in the comments down below, or let everybody else know that I forgot to talk about or kind of skimmed over and didn't really talk about too much. But that's kind of the main thing. This thing also has really solid stats. 120 HP is really solid. You're not going to be using an attack stat at all, but 110 special attack, even like uninvested, is still really solid. And then base 70 defense and special defense is really, really solid. You get a really solid move pool with this thing too. The ally switch is really solid. Especially in VGC, it's pretty damn good. Hyper Voice hits pretty hard with the normal stab. There's a lot of other really cool stuff. You get to Protect, Skill Swap, which I guess I don't know why you want to really be trading your ability, but Trick. The main thing it really does get is Trick Room. That's the main reason why you're probably going to be using on a team. Like I said, the only thing that's really outshadowing this thing right now, I think, mainly is Cresselia, just because Cresselia has way more bulk and has a little bit more team viability just with having like Lunar Blessing or that type of thing. So then it's able to use Terra type. This thing, you can also Terra this thing as well. I think another thing this thing has an advantage over Cresselia is like Flutter Mane has like, I think, like a 60 or 70% usage rate or something crazy still. It is probably the top rated like usage mon in the entire format still. up until this point, even in Regulation D, and it can't hit you with Shadow Ball. So, unlike Cresselia, you're taking full damage, you're taking super effective damage from Flutter Mane, and with this thing, you don't have to worry about Shadow Ball. It can still hit you with Moonblast and Dazzling Gleam, but that's not super effective damage, and depending on your build. Even if you just run like max HP and like you spread out your defenses with a bunch of other EV type builds, you're not going to be taking too much damage. So, a lot of other cool stuff here. Guard Swap could be pretty good, that type of thing. You can also set up weather. It does get Rain Dance, and it does get Sunny Day, so if you want like a really slow rain or like weather setter, it's pretty good. But the main thing you're going to be using this for is mainly just for like Trick Room. You also got some decent like coverage move with like Psychic, Psyshock. It gets Reflect, a few other things. It gets Terra Blast, which everything does. But if you want a Terra as well, I'm not sure what Terra you would really run on this thing, because I think it's typing. You're usually with this typing, you're not going to really want to waste a Terra on this thing. You're usually going to want to Terra something else on your team. At least that's what I think with this, or at least that's what I would probably do. Let me know in the comments down below what Terras have you guys seen, or what Terras you guys use with Fergraph. But overall, just a really solid, I think, anti-meta pick right now. I'm not going to talk about it very more. A lot of people are actually also saying like stuff like Bruxish and Serena because of Queenly Majesty and Dazzling, which is pretty much the same thing as Armor Tail. But the problem with those two mons is they both get shut down by Intimidate, and there's just a lot more stuff that's being played that's way more common that just hits them for way super effective damage. The problem with Serena is it's way too slow, and it usually just gets one-shotted by a lot of the huge threats right now. It can't break through Heatran, which is really common, or Shifu. Even with the water type variant, like you're still taking like 80% from a close combat most times, even if you run defensive. Yeah, it's crazy. And then there's a lot of other stuff. Tornadus is really common. There's a bunch of other things. Iron Bundle is still really, really common and actually rising in usage again. So there's just a lot of stuff. If you don't want to waste a Terra on like a Serena and stuff, I wouldn't really run that, especially with like Bruxish, which gets shut down by Intimidate most of the time. And it doesn't really have the best type of move pool. It also gets Trick Room and stuff, but I think its typing is a lot worse. And if you're going to be running a water type, like you're just running your Shifu, and there's a few other things. Even like Basque Legion, I would say was better as a water type right now. And doesn't really justify running it just for the priority, like protection with Dazzling. So, apart from that, let's get into the next mon here. This one you guys probably would, I'm going to like say right now, you guys probably would never guess what this next mon is going to be, but it's actually Bramblegast. Yeah, you heard me correctly, Bramblegast. Now, you guys are probably wondering, oh, well, how is this an anti-meta pick for Regulation D? And the main thing is Wind Rider. If you guys don't know what this ability actually does, is it actually protects you from wind-type moves and that type of thing. So, like, anything that wants to hit you with like a wind-type move, some of which being, there's no entire list. I don't have the entire list off. I tried looking for the entire list, and I couldn't find like an actual list because there was some that was missing. But like some of like the moves right now that are really spammable that this thing actually blocks with Wind Rider are Bleak Wind Storm, Hurricane, Heat Wave, Icy Wind, and there's a few other things that are also blocked by Wind Rider. I'm not sure off the top of my head which other ones that they are, but also another thing that it actually benefits from is Tailwind. So like a good option with this thing is like a fast Tailwind setter, even like a Talonflame, which was also really common in Regulation C and towards the start of the game. You can still pair this thing with Talonflame if you really want to with like priority Tailwind, but like the main thing you're going to be seeing this thing with is like Tornadus with like Tailwind, and you get an automatic +1 boost as well, which is kind of cool. And there's also a thing where you can actually like, kind of like self-proc the Wind Rider as well. I've seen like some teams that actually have like Hurricane on like a Tornadus too, so if you want to go to like +2 Wind Rider, you can actually like Hurricane your own Bramblegast and actually like get a +2 boost, which is kind of cool. But another thing that's really common with this thing is Iron Bundle is really common. Same with stuff like Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu is still pretty damn common with this thing, and it usually wants to spam like Heat Wave. So like being able to pretty much dodge the Heat Wave with Wind Rider and getting a +1 boost, it's a huge like counter meta pick. More of a niche type pick. I think Bramblegast is more of a niche type thing, because it still does get shut down by a lot, and its typing really isn't the greatest. You're kind of forced to Terra this thing, and if I were to Terra this thing, I'd probably Terra into like a fairy type. I think is really solid right now. Apart from that, you're not going to really be doing much. I think that or maybe like a poison type. But I think another thing that's kind of holding this mon back is kind of its move pool. Don't get me wrong, this thing is pretty good. Like I think the main item you're going to want to be running with this thing is actually maybe like a loaded dice. I think loaded dice bullet seed is pretty good. That way you can actually break sashes and you can do solid damage. You get the guaranteed 4 or 5 hits every single time. I think it's pretty good, and especially with this attack set. 115 is pretty good. It's a pretty good attack set, and you don't really have to invest as much speed if you really want to. If you're going to be running on this thing under Tailwind or like trying to get a boost based off of your abilities. So I think the only drawback with this thing is like its ghost coverage is really bad. So if you're not running Terra Ghost with Terra Blast, like you're kind of forced to run Shadow Sneak, which is its other like only good like physical ghost move apart from Phantom Force, and Phantom Force is just not that good in VGC because you can just make so many plays based off of it. So it has too much counter play. So I mean, I've seen Strength Sap too, mainly for stuff like Landorus and like other physical type mons to get a -1 off on them and fully heal, but your defenses are so low to begin with, like even at I think a -1 and getting something to -1 and fully healing, they're still, even at -1, you're probably going to still almost die most of the time, so you're kind of just wasting a turn. You're better off just doing damage or trying to do something else. So that's kind of mainly what you're going to be running with this thing right now. Probably like throw Protect on this set, and then I mean, it doesn't really have much. I think that's the main thing that's kind of holding Brambleghast back. Its move pool is kind of limited. Really is. I mean, it gets spikes, but you're not going to really be throwing up spikes in VGC very much unless you like have like a team based around it with like Whirlwind or some type of shit with Glamora. But apart from that, not really too much crazy here. Kind of just more of I think your fourth move is more of going to be like just filler, kind of just whatever you want. Maybe like Substitute or something. I don't know. But overall, I think it is kind of an anti-meta pick right now, just mainly because Wind Rider. And a lot of people don't even really know like what moves actually get affected by Wind Rider. A lot of people will just use like Hurricane or like Bleak Windstorm into you, or even like Heat Wave or Icy Wind, and they don't really know Wind Rider exists, let alone that Brambleghast probably even exists. And they have no idea what it does, and you'll automatically get a +1 boost. So you can kind of catch people off guard because this mod is just never played. It was played in Regulation C at the start of the game, and then it dropped off really quick once we started getting a lot more other mons and stuff started developing. So really cool mon though. I want to see this thing played a lot more. I think there's a lot of potential with this thing. I just wish it was move pool was a lot better because its move pool kind of sucks, and you're kind of forced to waste a Terra on this thing because its typing's pretty bad. Up next, we got it's actually a really cool mon. It's a really cool mon. It's actually Regidrago. Now, the main thing with this thing is I'm not seeing this thing played at all. And I think the main thing with this right now is if you want to run Regidrago, you gotta. I think the only like caveat to running this thing is you have to run it like under screens with like a Grimmsnarl or like a Klefki or like something that can set up screens. And you don't really see Klefki very much, but like something that can just set up screens really fast, or something that's bulky that can set up screens. And then either that or you have to run this thing under a Tailwind like a Tornadus, or something that can set up like a fast Tailwind, or some type of like speed control with Icy Wind. I think that's the main thing you're going to be needing to run with this thing. And the main thing you're going to be using this for is like every time is you're going to be running Terra Steel. That allows you to survive anything Fluttermane wants to go for. And you're able to blow it back with a Terra Steel, Terra Blast, which is great. So under Tailwind with this thing, like the main things you're going to be getting, Regieleki got its ability Transistor nerfed down to 1.3, but Regidrago was never changed. So anything that is a dragon type attack is a 1.5 times boost, which is crazy, especially when you have Dragon Energy, which if you guys know what Dragon Energy is, it's pretty much like a dragon type eruption. So that if you're like max HP, it's 150 base power plus dragon maw ability plus the 1.5 times plus stab, which is crazy. So if you're like under screens, or if like you're able to outspeed, I mean under screens you're usually going to want to play more like balance and try to just bring it in on stuff that actually naturally outspeed. But like if you're running under like Tailwind and that type of thing, or Speed Control, you're able to get like crazy damage off with this thing. And being that you're Terra Steel, I've seen people also run like Terra Ice for stuff like Landorus and a few other things that can kind of check you. But I think overall, I think if you really want to run this thing, I think you got to run Terra Steel. Otherwise, you kind of just get destroyed by like Flutter Mane and a few other things that kind of just destroy you. So I think the problem with this thing before too, like problem with this thing like last gen and a few other like past formats before this game, was the main problem was you had no real coverage. You also get Earth Power, I think, for this game, which is right here. You also get Earth Power, which is great. You get Explosion. Explosion coming off a base 100 ain't bad. It is one of the more powerful Explosion users in the game, so if you want to run like Explosion build, which ain't going to be too bad. Terra Normal, Choice Scarf, Explosion. You can see that as well. That's always an option. Yeah, although I'd probably run Azelf if you really want to do that, because Azelf has pretty much the same stats and it's a little bit faster. But apart from that, you don't really get too much coverage. But overall, this thing's really solid. I think if you want to run this thing right now, it's probably the best it's ever been. I don't see anybody really playing this thing. This thing is a really scary threat, and especially if you're not resisted or if you're not immune to a dragon type of move, like you're legit going to be just getting destroyed. It's crazy. I've went against this thing a few times over the span of Regulation D so far, and every time it just comes in, it usually just like nukes one or two things before it dies. It's crazy, especially if it has a team to really pair around this thing. Up next, we have another really cool mon, probably my favorite Hisuian type mon. Hisuian, where's that? Hisuian Zoroark. This thing's crazy good. I don't see anybody really using this thing, and then, like the abilities, like mainly the typing this thing has, and like the mind games this thing that can do it in a lot of your teams. It's just crazy. It has really solid stats too. Like base 100, you're never going to really be running this thing as a physical attacker, even though base 100 is decent. 110 speed's really solid, and then 125 is also really good. And then mainly the normal ghost typing. Ghost type moves do not affect you, and you also have fighting type move immunity, which is great with stuff like Urshifu running around. They can't hit you with fighting type moves, and stuff like Flutter Mane mainly. With how high of usage that thing has, can't touch you with Shadow Ball, and it's forced to go for like fairy type moves. And you can also use that to your advantage and just like defensive Terra into like a Terra Fire or like a Terra Poison or something else really crazy that can resist like the fairy moves or like anything else that you really are trying to resist with your team. So it's really cool mon. Its move pool is also really, really good. This move pool on this thing, it's actually really crazy. Bitter Malice is another move that I think that's actually really, really solid. And you get a 100% chance to lower your target's attack by 1. So 75 power isn't the greatest, but you also got to take into consideration the stab. So even if you're not invested, it's still doing a solid amount of damage if it's not, unless it's resisted. So I think another thing with Hisuian Zoroark too is you can play mind games. And the reason why the thing's kind of more of like an anti-meta type underplayed pick right now on this list is just because you can kind of play mind games around like fake out and like extreme speed and a bunch of other things. You can kind of disguise this thing as something that should probably going to be getting faked out by your enemy, like the opponent or the enemy team on first turn. Disguise it as a Zoroark and you don't have to take any fake out damage, which is kind of huge. Or like disguise it as something that you think isn't really, or your opponent probably will think it's not really that much of a threat, so they double target down whatever else you have. Or like thinking you have something else on the field when they actually don't. So you disguise it as like a mon in the back that you think really isn't that good versus your opponent's team, and they don't think it's really that much of a threat, but in reality it's actually a Zoroark. So they don't actually target you, and you're able to do a bunch of free crazy stuff, whether it's Bitter Malice or a bunch of other type of things. Also has a really fast fake tiers, which could be pretty good. Gets Flamethrower, a lot of other really cool stuff. I think the only problem with this thing, it also gets really fast Icy Wind, which is not many people actually talking about with this thing as well. A base 110 Icy Wind is pretty solid. It's not too bad. I think the only problem with this thing, like I said, is it doesn't really get much normal coverage. The best normal type move that's special that actually gets its Hyper Voice, so it's about the main thing it gets. Apart from that, it also gets priority with Shadow Sneak, ain't too bad if you want like some priority on your team. Shadow Claw, a bunch of other stuff. Trick, Will-O-Wisp is a huge one. Being able to get a Will-O-Wisp on something is really huge. Like an Urshifu or like a Landorus or something crazy. Can pretty much shut something down right off the bat, which is huge, especially if you're in disguise and they do not expect you that you actually are the Zoroark, which would catch your opponent really off guard. I think the main thing why this thing is mainly like an anti-meta pick is just because you're able to play mind games and you have pretty much probably the best immunity, one of the best immunities to fake out in the entire game because it doesn't affect you, and you have the mind games going for you. So it's really, really good, and you have a really solid move pool. I haven't really talked about like any of the items on a lot of these mods in this video as well because it just kind of depends what you really want to run, but just mainly the mod itself, its move pool, and kind of its stats is what I'm going to kind of talk about. I haven't really brought up any of the items or whatever too much throughout this because, like I said, a lot of the items kind of just depend on what team you're running, and a lot of these mods aren't really being played right now, so a lot of these mods I don't really know what the items are really going to be. I think the Zoroarks I usually see in my games, at least what I've been running and what I've been seeing, are usually Focus Sash, just so you're able to live a hit, at least one hit, and stay around a lot longer. I've seen a few other things too. I've seen Assault Vest ones. I've seen a few other crazy type builds with different items. So. Last but not least, we actually have Volcarona. Volcarona is crazy. I don't know why nobody's playing this thing. I don't know why nobody's playing Volcarona, especially under like Tailwind. You run this thing with like Tailwind, or even like a really good solid partner with this thing is like Gastrodon. With the Storm Drain, you're able to absorb all the water type moves you have that are going to be going your way. Gastrodon's pretty solid support for this thing, and then you're able to, if you can even set up like a +1 boost with like +1 with Quiver Dance, like you can kind of just roll the game. Especially with Terra. Terra that made this thing so good. You can pretty much run like any Terra type you want on this thing for your team, and you can kind of just roll people. I think the most common one is probably Terra Grass, at least as of right now. But like you can pretty much run like any Terra with this thing, and you can get away with it. It's just incredibly good. It's so damn good. I don't know why nobody's playing Volcarona right now, especially with like Terra. Like granted, you do have to waste a Terra on this thing to make it really good, but it's easily justifiable with how great this thing actually is. Base 100 speed, you have really solid Spadef. 135 special attacks, really, really good, even if you don't really invest too much into it. And then I think the main things that are kind of holding it back is poor defense. You're kind of weak to priority, and that's the only thing that's really kind of shutting this thing down because priority is just really common right now, but you can also build around that with a lot of other stuff. So, and it just comes down to what team you build around. If you build a really good team around it, you don't really have to even worry about priorities most of the time. So, then Flame Body is also really good. If anybody wants to contact you with a contact type move, especially like an Urshifu, like with a Terra Grass and the Urshifu trying to go after you with Terra Grass, they have to hit you 3 times. You have a 90% chance to burn them. So like if you're a Terra Grass and they Surging Strikes you have like a 90% chance to burn them. So you're probably going to get a burn on the Urshifu, and at that point they're pretty much useless. So this thing also has some other really cool moves. Fiery Dance is also really good. You get a 50% chance to get a +1 special attack boost, which is huge. You get Heat Wave, Giga Drain for Terra Grass. You get Hurricane if you want to use this thing in the rain as like a semi-rain sweeper or something on a rain team. Really solid. Overheat is pretty much nuke something. Rage Powder, it can also be really good as like a support type move or something to throw on like maybe more of a supportive set. Really solid. And then you have Quiver Dance, which is going to be a no-brainer on this thing for most teams. You're going to want to be setting up like Quiver Dance. Probably like Quiver Dance, like 2 moves, and 1 depending on whatever Terra you are. If you're like a Terra Grass, you're going to run like Giga Drain, and then maybe like a Fire type move. I wouldn't really even say Grass coverage or like bug coverage is really necessary right now. I think the main thing you're really going to be wanting to run like bug coverage for is mainly for like Cresselia and that type of thing, but apart from that, it doesn't really hit too much. And if you're going to be setting up anyways, like if you're going to get to like +1 or +2, you can either build a team around to kind of shut Cresselia down with like Taunt or that type of thing, or something else on your team to shut Cresselia down, or if you're going to be setting up on it, you can kind of still like 1 or 2 shot anyways once you start setting up. So I'm surprised this thing doesn't get Sleep Powder. I thought this thing actually got Sleep Powder. It's been a while since I actually like played with Volcarona, at least myself. I've seen it played a couple of times already, but I thought this thing actually got sleep powder and actually doesn't, which is kind of weird. Struggle bug. I said slugger bug. Struggle bug's actually a pretty good support option. It hits both your opponents and gives them -1 special attack boost or special attack decrease. It's pretty solid. String shot, -2 speed on the enemy team. Not too bad. More of a supportive option. Screech, fast Screech. I don't know if you really want to be running Screech on this team because it's kind of more of a frail mon and not really something you really want to be running it on, but and there's a lot more prankster, faster mons that'd be better with that, but it's always an option. Will-O-Wisp, pretty solid. Gets Tailwind as well, which is really, really good. A lot of really, really solid move pool. I don't know why nobody's really playing this thing. Like I said, it pairs really well with like Tailwind or even like alongside Gastrodon, which is another mon that's kind of really rising in usage currently. So apart from that, if you guys enjoyed this, if there's some stuff that I forgot to mention, let me know in the comments down below. This video went way longer than I thought it was going to, so there's just a lot to talk about. A lot of really cool stuff to talk about in this video. A lot of really cool mons too. A lot of you guys probably didn't expect like half these mons to be on this list, so if you guys want some really solid like anti-meta like picks that are just not being played nearly enough or not even being played at all right now, maybe you can take into consideration some of these mons that are on this list, because I think a lot of these are really good right now, and they're just not being played, or if they fit into a really certain niche that's like a really good like counter meta type build or counter meta type play. Just a lot of stuff that's being played right now. You can get some really cheeky, easy wins just based off of some of the type of stuff that these mons kind of do. So apart from that, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys like these types of videos, this video does well. And if this video does really good, I'll keep on doing these videos in the future. Something maybe similar to this. So apart from that, I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in a future video.